Here is a question that can reveal more about a leader than 100 speeches. What does he do when the people who humiliated him can no longer stop him? For the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, that question was answered after years of rejection, persecution, exile, and war. He returned to Mecca with power over many of the same people who had driven him out. Look, this is exactly where character becomes visible. It is easy to speak about mercy when you are weak. The real test comes when revenge is finally possible. But before we tell the story, we need one important rule. In Sunni Islam, every report is not treated as equally certain. The Qur'an comes first. Then come authenticated Hadith, meaning reports examined through their chains of transmission and their texts. Seerah, or prophetic biography, helps connect the events, but a moving story is not automatically a sound story. Sahih means sound, Hasan means good, and Dif means weak. Loving the Prophet does not require us to repeat every beautiful sentence as if it carried the same proof that honesty is not disrespect. It is part of protecting the Sunnah from careless attribution and protecting the viewer from certainty that the evidence does not justify. That rule protects us from two mistakes. One is exaggeration, where emotion becomes more important than evidence. The other is reduction, where an entire life is pushed through a few battles and political conflicts. Let us be clear. An honest seerah does not hide war, leadership, law, or judgment. But it also does not reduce 23 years of revelation, teaching, worship, family life, patience, and mercy to war alone. The Qur'an gives the main frame. It reminds the Prophet that Allah found him an orphan and gave him shelter. It calls him an excellent example, describes him as a man of outstanding character, and says that he was sent as a mercy to the worlds. The Arabic word kuluk means moral character, not branding, not public relations. It means the habits that appear when there is no camera, no applause, and no advantage to pretending. Think about the first revelation. Muhammad came home shaken and asked to be covered. Khadijah did not comfort him by talking about his wealth, intelligence, or social position. She pointed to the life she had personally witnessed. He maintained family ties, spoke truthfully, helped people in need, honored guests, and supported those struck by hardship. Before the public mission, there was private integrity. Before people heard that he was a prophet, the people closest to him had already seen the kind of man he was. Then came years of opposition. Muslims were mocked, pressured, attacked, and forced from their homes. One of the clearest tests came after the rejection at Taif. The angel of the mountains offered to crush the people who had abused him. The Prophet refused. He hoped that from their descendants would come people who worshipped Allah alone. Now, that is Rama mercy, but mercy does not mean calling evil good. It does not mean surrendering justice or leaving people unprotected. The Prophet defended his community, upheld agreements, judged disputes, and confronted aggression. Here is the thing. Force was not allowed to become a license for ego, cruelty, or collective revenge. Mercy remained a restraint even when conflict became unavoidable. The migration to Medina opened a completely different stage of his life. He was now a preacher, community leader, judge, treaty maker, military commander, husband, neighbor, and teacher. That matters because character must survive changing roles. Many people appear humble when they have no authority. The harder question is whether humility survives responsibility. Consider the Treaty of Hudaybiyyah. Many companions felt the terms were deeply painful. Even the words messenger of Allah were removed from the written agreement when the Meccan negotiator refused to accept them. The Prophet accepted the wording and chose a truce over wounded pride. Soon afterward, the Qur'an described this apparent setback as a clear victory. Let me explain the lesson in simple terms. Sometimes winning the moment can damage the future. Sometimes restraint looks like weakness only because we cannot yet see what it is protecting. Then the balance of power changed. At the conquest of Mecca, authentic reports say that whoever entered Abu Sufyan's house laid down his weapons or closed his door would be safe. The famous statement, "Go, for you are free," is widely repeated, but its exact chain is not firmly established. We should say that honestly, yet the larger point does not depend on that one quotation. The authenticated safety proclamation remains, and the city was not turned into an open campaign of mass revenge. Now look inside the home, because public scenes can be managed. Aisha reported that the Prophet worked for his family. She also reported that he did not strike a woman or a servant. Anas served him for 10 years and said he never even heard from him the small word of irritation, nor was he constantly asked, "Why did you do that?" or "Why did you not do that?" Public greatness can be performed for an audience. Private gentleness is much harder to fake. Aisha summarized the whole matter in one sentence: his character was the Qur'an. That does not mean he merely recited revelation. It means revelation became visible in patience, worship, courage, justice, restraint, family life, and responsibility. Near the end of his life, during the farewell pilgrimage, he declared human life and property sacred, abolished the old claims of blood revenge and pre-Islamic usury, instructed the people concerning women, and told them to hold firmly to the Book of Allah. Then he asked whether he had delivered the message. The people testified that he had. So what does following the Sunnah mean? It is bigger than copying an appearance or repeating a slogan. The Sunnah is his authoritative teaching and example. It must reach the home, the workplace, the financial decision, the argument, the social media post, the moment of anger, and especially the moment when you finally have enough power to hurt somebody back. Muhammad did not turn prophethood into personal luxury. An authentic report states that when he died, his armor was still mortgaged for food, no palace, no personal empire, no invitation to worship him. He left the Qur'an, his Sunnah, and a lived example of submission to Allah. Long story short, the deepest question in the Seerah is not only what happened to Muhammad. The deeper question is, what happens to us when we study him? Do we become louder, or more truthful, more tribal, or more just? More impressive in public, or more merciful at home? More eager to defeat people, or more concerned with guiding them? And if power entered your hands tomorrow, would it reveal the Prophet's Sunnah in you, or would it simply make your existing ego more powerful?